For a little bit of background, I'm in a wonderful relationship now with a guy I met on Tinder. So this is no way, shape, or form me shitting on the app, even though the app can sometimes feel like a cesspool. I'm currently a senior year at a 4-year university, but this happened in my sophomore year when I was 19. For me, it was pretty hard to find someone to just casually date and get to know, since I'm a bit of an introverted individual and wasn't looking for any old hump and dump. I also went through my fair share of abusive relationships, so dating for me was really difficult when it came to opening up and trusting people. When I matched with Chris, not his real name by the way, I was pleasantly surprised. He was a funny, smart, interesting college student with a decent job and good intentions. I enjoyed talking to him, but there was always a lot of anxiety when I spoke with him. I know now that I should have trusted my gut instinct, but at that time, I assumed I was doing my introverted trust issues bullshit and tried to push that feeling away. We would talk a few times a week, and every time we did, the feeling would persist. Only each time we talked, it would be stronger. He started to make comments about how he wanted me to be his girlfriend and how he was so excited for me to meet his parents. But we hadn't met and had only talked on and off for a few weeks at this point. So slowly, I stopped responding to some of his messages. Then I started to leave them completely unanswered. One day, I confided in my friends and told them about the bad feeling I always had while talking with Chris. They told me that I wasn't being open to new experiences because I hadn't let go of my past and that I wasn't being fair to him. So, reluctantly, after a few weeks of radio silence and feeling guilty, I messaged him again. After another week or two of messaging and catching up, he asked me to go out to dinner with him. I was hesitant to say yes as my anxiety was through the roof, but my friends insisted that it was just nerves and it would be good for me to go out with someone. I agreed, and he excitedly told me he had plans to take me to a nice Japanese restaurant in the city next to my campus. My friends were ecstatic and asked to see a picture of him. I pulled up his Tinder profile, and when they swiped through the pictures, they were silent. They said, quote, "You know, he kind of looks like blank of a particularly abusive ex here," end quote. I went into a full-blown panic attack. Once I saw the resemblance, there was no going back. There was no way I was going anywhere with this guy. I texted him back the night before the date and explained that I no longer felt comfortable going out and I was sorry. He never texted me back. That same week, I started getting multiple phone calls every day from an unknown number. They would leave me voicemails that would say things like, "Call me back, babe," or "Baby, where are you? Why won't you give me a chance?" I tried ignoring them, but one day, after getting almost 10 calls, I answered and ready to curse someone out. I called Chris by his name and told him to F off, and was met with laughter. He said, "This isn't Chris, this is Jeff." "Who the hell?" He said, "Chris said I could have you." And then he started laughing, so I hung up and he immediately called back. I sent him to voicemail. He said, "Chris said you wanted to go out with me instead. He told me what university you go to and showed me your pictures. I'll wait on campus if I have to." I blocked his number, and for a few more days, I got a few more unknown calls and voicemails detailing some pretty weird, aggressive, and gross things, but they eventually died down. I don't know if this guy was serious or maybe it was Chris getting his friend to F with me as a revenge for canceling, but whatever it is, it had me looking behind me anytime I walked anywhere on campus for the rest of the semester. My roommates and I had a male friend to stay with us for a while just in case. I started going back to my hometown on weekends because I was afraid to stay on campus for too long. It's been 2 years, so I hope that in this amount of time, Chris and Jeff have learned to become better people, or that someone kicked their asses already. I went on a Tinder date some time ago while I was adjusting to a new city I had moved to. I didn't really know anybody there, so I used some online dating apps to see the dating scene around town. I landed one from a girl that seemed just like an artsy, hippie type of girl. We had a few exchanges through the Tinder app and then decided to meet up for a drink. I picked her up at her house and she greeted me at the door and gave me a hug. She said the name of a local bar she wanted to go for us to chat and get to know each other. I told her I would drive and proceeded to my car. The first red flag I noticed was when I walked to my car and opened the door. She had just followed me to the driver's side and was standing behind me staring. I looked at her blankly for about 15 seconds and asked her if she was going to get in. She said, "Sure, I would love to," and went the long way to the passenger side around the back of the car. Since I had just met this girl, I figured she had just maybe smoked some weed or something, as I had kind of got the vibe she was a bit of a stoner. As I was driving to the bar, she talked in a very low voice, almost as if she was trying to whisper. I am not hard of hearing or anything, but I had to ask her to repeat herself several times just so I could make out the full sentences she was saying. When we got to the bar, I made sure we got a seat closer to the back, away from most people, just so I could have a little quiet in order to hear her. The conversations honestly carried on as normal from this point, and it was actually a fun time for the time being. We talked about different things we were interested in, and she did bring up that she did recreationally use weed and a few other tripping substances like shrooms and such. I am not much of a fan of these, but it at least made me relax in the back of my mind to think maybe she was just high off marijuana, and that rationally explains some of the out there behavior. Granted, I had a few drinks at this point, so I was honestly not thinking straight. I asked her if she wanted to go to my place after drinks and she agreed. When we got to my place, we had a few more drinks. Then she started talking about jewelry. This is where it gets weird. She told me her jewelry was her big secret and it defined her. When I asked her why it was so important, she said, quote, "I'm actually Anastasia and I was never killed in Russia. My jewelry is my link to my past," end quote. It was so hard for me to take that serious at this point with how much I drank, so I kinda challenged that statement using a little bit I knew about history. At this point, she freaked out and started yelling at the top of her lungs about how I don't respect ancestors and history. Then she got quiet and tiptoed right up to me and grabbed me by my neck. She then brought my face eye to eye with hers while still holding my neck. She says at this point, quote, "I am a shaman and I will curse you. My ancestors have destroyed many people and you do not respect that. You are from oppressive ancestors and they will be punished," end quote. Then she put her hand in a whiskey glass and made a cross on my face and kissed my forehead. At this point, I started to sober up a little. I talked her into calming down, telling her I was only joking. Then she slowly started getting back to normal. Then she started talking about her cat fetish. She tells me she has a list of people who she tames to act as cats. I am not about judging people on their fetishes, so I listen in. She then tells me all the things she does to them and starts acting like a cat in my living room. If she had not yelled at me earlier on, I might have almost been turned on by it. My red flags in my head were tingling like crazy at this point, so I just listened and tried not to set her off. She noticed sage on my kitchen counter and asked me to let her light it and bless the house. Side note, I use sage to make my house smell better occasionally. It's kind of a ritual I like to do, but it's mine and mine own. Something I take very personally and like to do myself. I tell her no, she can't light it, and that it's my thing to do on my own. Then she freaks out, telling me I'm a horrible human being and screaming all over the place. I tell her I can take her home now, and she runs to the door and goes outside. As I get outside, she is screaming at the top of her lungs that I am a horrible person and I should go die. I tell her she can walk herself home then, and I go back to my place and lock the door. She then starts banging on the door hard in about 10 minutes, saying she left her phone in there. I grab her phone off the kitchen counter and open the door to hand it to her. She tries to barge inside and I block her with my forearm. She then acts like she was about to punch me. I just hold my ground and tell her she is not coming in. She screams she wanted the whiskey bottle we were drinking from. I told her hell no, because I paid for the damn thing. I slam the door at that point and lock it. I hear her bang on the door for a minute. I then hear her footsteps going down the stairs. I waited about an hour and then went walking outside to see if she was still hanging around. I didn't see her, nor did I ever see her again after that. I know this is probably not the scariest encounter ever, but for the next few nights, I was creeped out, always walking around the area I live to make sure she wasn't hanging around. I honestly hope she's okay wherever she is, but I hope to never see her again. Back in 2019, I, an 18 years old female, decided to download Tinder a few months after a rough breakup. I was very inexperienced with dating and pretty shy, so it seemed unlikely that I would meet a potential partner in person. Anyway, after a few matches that led to nothing, I came across the profile of someone that I found very attractive, a 21 years old male. We matched, exchanged Snapchats, and continued to set up a date. Our first date was relatively normal/enjoyable. We saw a movie and by the end of it, I felt like we hit it off. However, our relationship was extremely short-lived. Not long after I had agreed to be his girlfriend, after about a month of going out, he began to behave very erratically and would sometimes fall completely silent in the middle of conversation, ignoring me when I tried to ask him what was wrong. He became hot-tempered, slamming doors and spitting on the road when he was mad. I started to feel really uncomfortable about our relationship. This went on for about a few weeks until one night, when we were on our way to have a dinner downtown, he fell silent mid-conversation. I became extremely anxious as he pulled into a nearby parking garage, wondering what I had done to upset him. As we parked, I decided to ask him what was wrong. He didn't answer. When I asked him again, he shouted at me, "Shut the F up." I was completely frozen for a moment, but I finally got up the courage to tell him we were done, gather my belongings from the car, and walk over to the nearest coffee shop to call an Uber. It was fairly late at night, so I walked as fast as I could, hoping he wouldn't follow me. When I made it to the shop, I noticed I had several missed calls from him. When I made it home that night, I blocked him on all social media and decided to never contact him again. I'm fairly familiar with the dynamic of toxic relationships, and I knew that if he could talk to me that way, completely unprompted, it was likely that he was capable of much more. About a week goes by. As I start to settle my emotions a bit, I decided to confide in a friend who had never met the guy about what happened, feeling completely embarrassed. A few nights later, I received a text from the same friend. It was a screenshot of an Instagram DM from someone she didn't follow, my now ex. It said something to the effect of, quote, "Hey, I'm sorry we're having to meet like this, but blank is ignoring me and I need to talk to her," end quote. My heart sunk. I decided to message all of my friends separately and let them know what happened, just in case. Later that week, I started receiving several DMs from various accounts, all without profile pictures or posts. Eventually, I gave in and responded to one, asserting that the relationship was over and that I didn't want to hear from him again. I blocked the accounts immediately afterwards. As time went on without hearing a word in weeks, I figured I had reached the end of the situation until one morning while I walked to my car. I noticed something dangling around the handle of my car door. It was a necklace I gave him. He had only picked me up once from my house before. The thought of him driving to my house, that is about an hour and a half from his place, earlier that night freaked me out. I was shaken up for a while. It was by no means an expensive necklace, and I had the same exact one, but I kept it pushing. I thought maybe it was his way of acknowledging that we were done. 2 months later, I was working at my job at a small boutique near my house. I was used to answering the phone several times a day, so when the phone rang, I thought nothing of it, but when I picked up, I immediately recognized his voice. He started rambling about wanting a sweatshirt back, but I hung up before he could finish. That was the last time I would ever tell someone I was dating where I worked. I was completely losing it at this point, especially considering he had never called me at work while we were together. I didn't even know how he knew that I was working that day or time. I told my older sister the situation, and she, being very protective, decided to message him herself. She told him to leave me alone and even offered to give him back the sweatshirt for me. He refused and insisted on meeting up with me in person to get it. When it became abundantly clear that he didn't actually want the sweatshirt back, she threatened him with a PPO, to which he never responded. That was the last time I heard from him.